Hello everyone, and welcome back to 20-0 Tactics with me, the Loremaster, and I've been given the enviable task this month of talking to you about psychology. So the way I'm going to structure this video is I'm going to give you a bit of a chat about fear, and then I'm going to have a slightly longer chat about terror. And we're not going to worry, if you came here to talk about immune psychology, then you are going to be slightly disappointed beyond me saying this to you now. Immune psychology units are immune to fear, terror and panic. And in addition, they can't flee, which is bit of column A, bit of column B. But fear and terror is basically what I'm going to be talking to you about today, and ways to use it a bit better in our games of Warhammer or to get a bit more out of it. Now, I think with fear in particular, this is often seen as a special rule as a bit of a nothing. Lots of people kind of deride fear, it's rubbish, it never does anything, it's not very good. You must have heard these types of conversations at a gaming table, sometimes by members of the Triple Crown War gaming team. And I think that we sometimes in the kind of Warhammer community view view fear in the wrong way. I think we look at it as a kind of rule that's rubbish because we don't think it has a huge impact. But I think we should look at it as a bonus rule. And if we're setting ourselves up for real big success, we can get more out of fear. So I've got a bit of a setup on the table here, to look at fear, if you will. So you can see what I've got here is I'm looking for opportunities to maximise my fear. And that's the first thing that I'm going to talk to you guys about. So we can see that the Doom Ball over here is a very long way away from the Gore, which means the Gore are far more susceptible to being caught by fear than they would be otherwise, because they're out of the Doom Ball's Inspiring Presence range. So this is quite important. So we could see this as an opportunity to maximise our fear. So if we were to put, say, our Crypt Horrors in, boom, lovely. What we need to think about is, well, how can I get the best chance of maximising my fear check here? Well, I'm going to bring these bats up and block the Doom Ball off as best as I can so he can't get near the Gore, and then I'm going to do the same with the Hex Wraiths and the Razor Gore. And the reason I'm going to do the same with the Hex Wraiths and the Razor Gore is so he doesn't try and charge the Razor Gore out of the way and run the Doom Ball round the back. So he's got to take the frenzy check now. We've got to push him round. It becomes more challenging for him. Now, we've maximised our fear in the first instance because we've taken it out of Inspiring Presence. Similarly, if we can take the enemy unit out of, or if they fall out of hold ground or Inspiring Presence range, this is great. If we can hold stuff off in that way, even better. If there's ways that we can reduce leadership, and I just don't think people look at this enough. I don't see enough people looking at the combination of reducing leadership and fear. Now, vampires, obviously, I've got out today. They're really good at this. You can put reduce fear aura on the vampire. You can have doom and darkness from the Law of Death. Although it is worth pointing out that the Law of Death is the most accessible law in Warhammer. And that is to say, more armies can take the Law of Death than any other Law of Magic. I know that because I made a very, very, very long video on 20-0 Tactics about the Law of Death. So don't miss that chance, if you like. If you've got Doom and Darkness, sometimes there's a great move to put it onto a unit that you're going to cause fear on, particularly if it's slipped out of the General's range. And I'll tell you why that's so important. If we go back to this example here, right? The Crypt Horror is weapon skill 3. The Gore weapon skill 4. Means we're being hit on 3s, we're hitting on 4s, right? Even if we're both weapon skill 3, for example, if they're Men of the Empire, if we can make them fail that fear check, they are hitting us on 5s and we are hitting them on 3s. And that is a huge impact. Fear can have a huge impact. The reason that people don't see that is because what they see is, well, everyone's got Inspiring Presence, everyone's got a reroll. But actually, they don't always. If we spot the opportunities to maximise the fear. In a scenario like this, if my vampire had aura, I'd bring the vampire over immediately to get in the aura range. 100%. If I had Doom and Darkness, my key spell this turn would be trying to get Doom and Darkness off onto those to promote the fear. And it was crucial that I implemented the block off strategies as well, because this guy's also now got a test of March as well if he wants to try and get in range next turn to save them from the fear that I've enacted on them. So that's number one with fear. I think it's missed by a lot of players, and I think that when you see the opportunity, and it is a spot the opportunity on the table, try to maximise it. That's the first point. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to shuffle our table around a little bit. So, imagine the peaks have come barrelling up. And they've made a nice overrun into our Cryptors, and it's now our turn. Now, ordinarily, we may decide that we wouldn't want to charge our Varghulf in to something like these Razor Gore. And the reason is obvious, we can't Thunderstomp. The Razor Gore are quite hardy, they're quite tough, the Varghulf for instance on 4s, so why be bothering? Well, so many units like Razor Gore cause fear, right? But have very low weapon skill to go with it. If you think things like Trolls are immune psychology, but Razor Gore are a great example of something that causes fear but has lower weapon skill. Phoenix Guard have high weapon skill but cause fear. Not really giving my my examples the best Ogres. Shots here. Ogres are probably the biggest example though. Thanks, Duke. In terms of low weapon skill cause fear. So they get away with the fear element. So these Razor Gore currently don't really care about the fear. But actually, if we were to just bring this Varghulf in, or these Hex Wraiths, if they were in a better position to charge, are probably even better choice, to be honest. We now cause terror, that causes fear, and fear causing units. Not something, again, I see people bother doing at all often. Reckon we're going to be just out, oh lovely, we're just out of the range of the general. So, suddenly they're leadership 5, leadership 6. If we haven't done any augmentation to their leadership, I can't remember what they are base, apologies guys. I know I should know every book inside out, but sometimes I don't. I think they're 5 base, they might be 6. But suddenly they're low leadership, they will be taking a fear check because you've used the terror to bounce the fear down. And then when they fail, which they probably will, that's a huge impact because again, you're now hitting on 3s, the poison from the horrors as well is great. I mean, that's good when they're hitting on 4s, but the ability to get additional hits plus the poison, giving you more chances to wound, means that the Razor Gore are in real danger and they're hitting you back on 5s. So they're not building their own combat res in the way they'd like to. And it can be so much more impactful, particularly on a turn when a unit like this makes a charge. Or if they indeed, for example, Knights that cause fear. Like Chaos Knights, getting a foul on them on the turn they charge if they've got lances would be huge. So I just think it's a bit of an underutilised element, fear. I think one of the reasons is because people don't think about enough option to maximise their fear. And actually against units like Ogres, Razor Gore, low leadership, low weapon skill but cause fear, getting the terror causing in there, adding the support layers is huge. So fear, you could leave this video saying you think it's rubbish. All I'm saying is give some of this stuff a try. Look for opportunities to get the most out of your fear and look for some opportunities to score fear when you wouldn't normally do it. And actually see how you find it, because I find this is a real underused gem on the tabletop. So I'm going to stop the video there, I'm going to reset the table, so you're going to see me fade to black and then reappear in mystical fashion so I can have a chat to you about terror. Okay guys, I talked a lot in that last part of that video about low weapon skill and fear. What I meant was low leadership. So every time I say weapon skill, switch that for leadership. Take my most humble and profuse apologies because sometimes when I'm off on a tangent I get a little bit mixed up, but it's that low leadership with the ability to stack up the fear through terror or picking on the units that really means you can bully those enemy choices. So we're going to have a little look at terror now, and the main element that I want to talk about is the what we might call the terror bomb, and where we sort of chase things off. And I wanted to look at a couple of options. So I think that this is not done anywhere near enough against enemy chaff. And in this scenario, you can see there's some great opportunities. And also, it's all about the contingency planning, okay? So if I was contingency planning here, I'd ideally want them in that type of position. So these look like ostensibly they're set to redirect, okay? And in fact, sometimes I've even been known to pop them behind a unit to do this, but in this setup of the table, it doesn't really work that well. So the beastmen have moved up. They've not charged my bats because they're too far out. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a charge with my terror causing wraiths onto these, okay? Now the reality is, with them being out of the General's Inspiring Presence, they'll almost certainly fail this terror check. But I just don't see enough people do this. They're much more likely with something like Hex Wraiths to just run through. You could then choose to redirect their charge into the second unit, which clears that path there, and then declare this charge into the Gores. Now this would be clearing the way with your terror, which is huge, okay? But an even better option in this specific example is the Terror Bomb, and this is missed by so many players. And very recently I scored an 1100 point unit kill at a tournament, and I wasn't in the best position ever in the game. I wasn't doing badly, but 1100 point kill with this tactic, 1 minute game, hands down 1 minute game. So what happened is my opponent elected to flee because he didn't want to get caught by the quality of the unit charging him, but it's the same principle. You can generate the flee through the terror. So the terror happens, these guys turn tail and they flee. The wraiths then redirect their charge into these gore. Okay? They squeeze through the gap, because these obviously also being skirmished, they close as soon as they move. These guys come up to charge them. Now, if these fail their terror check, or if they elect to flee because of the distance, they'll turn and they'll flee centre to centre, right? That's about 8 or 9 inches. However, the key element here is the light unit. I've got some bats here to do this, and they are one of the best units. I'm only 11 away. So I declare that charge, and because they're already fleeing, we all know the story. Oh, a cheeky 9 and we've got them off the board. So, which is exactly what happened. I used bats actually to do it at the event I was at a few months ago where I did that. This is huge. It's setting your battle line up to be able to overflow these. So don't ignore your chaff. Your chaff is one of the best units in the game to do this. Most people's chaff will be fast moving, and it will be very kind of cheap and low importance. If it ends up out of position from doing it, you probably aren't that concerned. But if you've got flying chaff, Pegasus Knights for you Bretonnian players, phenomenal for this, because let's face it, they're not a lot of use for anything else. Bat Swarms for your vampire players. Vargeist, another great one for vampire players, but Bat Swarms I think are probably the upper echelon because they're really cheap. You don't care if they get yanked out of position. Harpies, don't see anywhere near enough Harpies on tabletops for Warhammer. Furies for you Demons players. It's so easy for Demons players to pull this off because they've got access to the death magic if they want it as well. So again, exactly the same stuff we were talking about with fear. If you can lower your opponent's leadership when you do this, absolutely humongous, okay? What you're looking for is to generate a scenario where they flee from the terror, and then you can do it again. And this is why we value fly and terror so highly when we do our deep dive videos, because ultimately it's that ability to get over the top and down. I haven't even got a terror causing fly. If I had a dragon, for example, if I was using something like that, everyone loves a magma dragon, don't they? See them all the time at our events. One of those, fantastic thing that you can do this same tactic with. Warpfire dragons, they're the new magma dragon. You get that charge sprung, you get them moving, and then it can be these lighter chaff units that force the charges. One of the things that's so powerful about those lighter chaff units, like your fast cavalry, your reavers, your dark riders, your bat storms in this case, is they have massive charge ranges. So even if we were to go back to the table and I was to declare this charge, and these guys ran a really long way, right? Because I charged from, say, here now. They ran a huge distance and I failed to catch them, right? These bats are still probably going to be in range to declare a charge. Have I gone too far? Nah, of course I haven't. Still got it in spades. 19 inches. Now that's not out of the range of the bats. I don't care that the bats aren't going to get there. Spoilers! Spoilers! I'm going to give some spoilers. Spoilers, don't care they're not going to get there. It's not about them getting there. It's about those gore going off the table for nothing. Yeah? So, setting up to do this. Think about when you position your terror causing units. So I like a couple of terror causing units if I can, and then what I'll often try to do is have them sort of relatively balanced in my army on each side, and then I'll try to pair them with chaff units so that I can set myself these traps if the opportunity becomes available, and it's massive. And again, exactly the same we talked about with the fear. If you can identify a unit in particular that you think that's out of inspiring presence, or that's too far away, or I can get that with a Doom and Darkness this turn, that's the unit to oh, I got that with Doom and Darkness in my last turn, it's still up. That's the unit to snap this tactic on, right? Because it will catch people out hugely. And terroring stuff off is, or even panicking stuff off, same type of tricks, is they're free victory points. They're victory points you don't need to do anything for. And as I say, in the example I used recently, that gentleman had 2 wizards in that unit that fled. It was an 1100 point unit, and they were 21 inches from my bats when they finished their flee move from my monster. And I said, well, I'll just declare the charge. And he was like, well, you need a 12. I'm like, it doesn't matter, you've got to flee. And obviously, spoilers, I didn't make the charge because they fled off the board. But it's that powerful. It's that powerful a tactic. It's 3 victory points. And the beauty of this as well, particularly if you've got a flying terror causing unit. So if we were to have our dragon, I'm just going to grab a dragon, guys. So, there he is. The legend that is Dev. He's back. If we were to have a dragon, we can really look quite seriously at the directions that we can generate here. So, for example, if I had this dragon here, in my movement phase, I might decide to fly the bats over to here, try and keep them a long way away. Perhaps because I'm worried about these guys here, I'll move my wraiths up, pull them over, my bats like this, and then what I might do, my dragon, is pop him up here, like this, right? And now next turn, these guys charge, say, or we get some forward movement, right? Lovely. These guys decide to try and crowd my dragon, because, you know, that's what we want to do, shoot him. I declare the charge here. If I can get the terror, they flee away, they're probably off the board. But say somehow, miraculously, they roll the exact amount to land just here by these beautiful hex wraiths. The bats spring the trap, because I've thought about it. And that's the power of the flying monster. And then there's the ability to redirect. Then I'll redirect my dragon's charge and see if I can get him in to the side of these razor gore to lend some damage, or see if I can get him into something. Maybe I'll redirect it into one of these, see if I can just get them to run off the table for free, right? Just gets them out of my way, just gets free stuff happening. So really, with this, it's about setting a trap. So look at your fast cav units where you could place them. Look at units like bats. As I say, vampires are one of the best armies in the game for doing this, but there are lots of others that can. And then think about how you can cause the double stack effect, where you make them run and make them run again. Yeah? Because those are, even if they don't go off the table, can end up down on the packed board edge and never get into the game. And suddenly you can kill everything else because you've not had to deal with them. So don't miss the power of terror. So we've talked about its use in kind of reducing fear, inducing fear in fear-causing units with low leadership. And now we've talked about the ability to exploit it with these bombs and get stuff fleeing, and then overlap that with the trap pieces that you've set. And don't forget, all of this can be improved by any element that lowers an opponent's leadership, reduces their inspiring presence, or stops them. I'm looking at you, Death Mask of Canute. Why are you 60 points? Why can't you be less? And you're all good. So I've done my best to give you some pointers for psychology. Terror, I'll be stunned if you can't find some real use out of this, because this is one of my top go-to tactics for Warhammer games. In terms of the fear, I think you might be surprised if you give some of that a go. Just remember, every time I said weapon skill, what I should have said was leadership. So don't forget that I mean low leadership. Pick on enemy units, gang up on them, smash them up, win your games of Warhammer, get back to the Night of the Realm mustering ground, where you can check out all the other episodes of 20 Tactics. And you know what? There's a ton of other exclusive content on there as well. And I'll see you in about 4 weeks' time, and we'll do this whole thing again on 20 Tactics. Remember to tag your friends and like, subscribe and share. Then head over to triplecrownwargaming.com and become a Knight of the Realm today.
What are you doing, mate?
You alright?